Alright, today I'm going to show you how to make a DJI Action 4 footage look just like what you saw earlier in this video using the new film look creator inside DaVinci Resolve 19. However, before we start, I highly recommend you to watch my DJI Action 4 settings and exposure video, which will help you get much better results in camera, making it much easier to manipulate colors in post-production, because if you're going to mess up the exposure and colors in camera, it's going to be very hard to get good results in post-production. Regardless, I'm going to leave the link for that video down below. Let's start. Alright, this is the clip that I'm going to color grade today. And by the way, all the clips that I'm going to show you today were shot in D-Log-M, but some were shot in 25 or 50 or 100p. So the first thing I'm going to do is apply my node tree. I'm gonna go here and apply this node tree in here. So my first node is my CST in. It goes from Rec 709 to DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate. And the reason I'm using Rec 709 is because D-Log-M is not really a true log format. It's basically a normal Rec 709 clip, but with less saturation and less contrast. And the reason I'm using the DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate color space in here is because it provides a wider color space and dynamic range to work with. If you're wondering, this is my project settings. DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate, color output space is Rec 709 type A. Regardless, my CST out goes from DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate to Rec 709, but Rec 709 type A because I'm using a Mac computer. Alright, the next node is my noise reduction node, and I'm not going to do any noise reduction in here, so I'm going to delete it. And then I have exposure and contrast. Let's add some contrast. I'm gonna go to my color wheels, slightly reduce the midtones in here, slightly reduce the shadows, something like that, and slightly elevate the highlights. Maybe bring up the midtones, slightly bring down the shadows, something like this. This is the before and after, before and after. Next node is my balance node, where I adjust my white balance. And honestly, this shot already looks well balanced to me, which is why I highly recommend to you to nail the settings in camera as much as possible, because then you won't have to do much in post-production to make your clips look good. But still, I think I'm going to slightly remove the yellow tint I see here. Just a little bit, maybe like -40. And also I can see some green, so I'm going to introduce some magenta, maybe like this, and that's it. This is the before and after, before and after. All right, my next node is the saturation node, and I'm using the color space HSV method to do that. And the reason is because it allows me to individually control the saturation for the shadows, midtones, and highlights, and also does not affect the exposure in my shots. So I'm definitely going to add some saturation in the gamma and also in the highlights in here. Maybe something like this, I guess. This is the before and after, before and after. All right, my next node is my skin node, where I adjust my skin tones, but because we don't have any skin tones in here, I'm going to delete this node. And my next node is the window node, where I add some windows if necessary, but I don't think I'm going to add any windows in this shot, but I'm still going to leave it in here just in case if I'll need to add some windows later on. And this node, I usually keep it empty in here just in case if I need to adjust something. And I think in this case, I'm going to adjust the hue of the greens and also of the oranges or the tree. So I'm gonna go to my HSL curves, hue versus hue, and I'm going to select the greens or yellows in here and change the hue towards like almost blue green like, just to make it look a bit more moody. And I'm also going to isolate the oranges and reds to change the color of the tree and slightly push the color towards red. And also I'm gonna go to my hue versus saturation, select the same colors, and I'm going to desaturate the greens here and the yellows just slightly. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the tree maybe. And just to keep the shadows clean, I'm gonna go to my luma versus saturation, select the darkest parts of the image and desaturate the shadows. All right, and the next node is my lift node, where I basically compress the highlights and lift up the shadows, but I think I'm not going to do it in here because you can do the same thing inside the film look creator. So I'm just going to rename this node to film look creator, and I'm going to apply the effect in here, and we're going to start with the color grading process. So I'm going to go here to the effects panel and select film look creator. You can find it under Resolve Film Emulation. just paste. So the first menu in here is where you can select some presets. You have some built-in presets like this default 65mm, 35mm cinematic, which will add cinematic bars on top and bottom. And also there's bleach bypass, and there is nostalgic, which will add this frame, like filmic frame, and no effects, and also costume. I'm going to select 65mm, and then we're going to adjust each slider to make it look as good as possible. So the first slider in here basically allows you to control the color adjustments, the intensity of the color adjustments. And the second slider here basically allows you to control the effects adjustments, the intensity. Something like, vignette, halation, bloom, grain will be effects, and something like exposure, contrast, highlights, and so on will be under color. Now this 3D LUT compatible option will basically allow you to override the effects or block them. So you'll be able to only export the color information as a LUT and use it in your future projects, or maybe if you want to export it and sell it online or something like that. The next menu section in here is the color space overrides. I'm not going to use that because I've done it manually with my CST out and CST in. And here we have some color adjustments. We can adjust the exposure here. Let's do it now. I'm actually going to bring up the exposure slightly to something like this maybe. Then we can adjust the contrast, the highlights, which will basically compress the highlights. I'm gonna zoom in here, go with the highlights, basically compresses the highlights. Also look at the waveform in here. I think I'm going to just slightly compress the highlights like this, and that's it. And fade will basically fade the blacks, and I'm gonna leave it somewhere around here. White balance is self-explanatory. You can push the image towards yellow or blue. But because I want this shot to be quite moody, I'm going to push it slightly towards blue. And the tint, the same, pushes the image towards green or magenta. And I'm gonna go towards green in this case. Skin bias, I'm not really sure what this one does, but I don't have any skin tones in here, so I'm just going to leave it as is. Subtractive saturation will basically do the same thing as with my HSV color space method. It will add saturation without affecting the exposure in the shot, as you can see. It just adds basically color to the shot. Richness, I'm also not really sure what it does, but I guess it saturates the dominating colors in the shot. Not really sure. If you know, let me know down below. But I like how it looks right here, maybe. And bleach bypass will basically push the image slightly towards black and white, but you can, adjust it how you want. You can totally make it black and white, or you can do somewhere in between, which is what I'll do probably. Put it somewhere around here. And actually, I'm going to come back to my contrast and slightly reduce it here. And also my fade, slightly increase it in here. And the next section is quite fun actually, split tone. And this will allow you to create a split tone between colors, between, opposite colors like teal and orange, for example. So I'm going to increase the amount to the maximum to be able to see the difference it makes. And basically, as you can see right now, it has green in the highlights and purple in the shadows, or you can do, like the typical teal and orange look. If I'm gonna go somewhere around, let me see. Yeah, this is the teal and orange look, like blue in the shadows and then yellow in the highlights. And of course, you can adjust it however you like. I think I'm gonna go somewhere around here. You can also control the pivot. So basically this will allow you to decide how much of one color you want towards the highlights or the shadows. So on one side we have here blue, on the other side we have yellow, and you can decide where you want more yellow or more blue towards the highlights or shadows. So if I'm gonna go slightly towards the right, it's gonna start pulling back the yellow from the shadows towards the highlights, as you can see, or more blue towards the shadows. So I'm gonna just keep it somewhere around here, I think. And I'm going to reduce the amount to about here and slightly play with the hue angle. Actually, I'm gonna come back to my exposure slider here and slightly increase the exposure. All right, next is where you can adjust the filmic effects like halation, bloom, grain, and so on. I'm gonna start with the vignette. I'm gonna definitely add some vignette in this shot just because I like it. Then with the halation, I'm definitely going to decrease the halation because I don't like this red color in here. So I'm going to subtract the amount and also the radius. Maybe play around with the hue in here. And I'm gonna leave it somewhere around here. Regardless, let's go to the bloom, and this will basically soften the highlights or the brightest parts of your shot. So I'm gonna leave it somewhere around here. Play around with the radius. Go to my halation, slightly increase the halation here. Play around with everything, see what I like more. Something like this I think looks good. And lastly is the grain, which I'm definitely going to add. I'm going to zoom in here, just increase the amount. Play around with the slider in here. Increase the size. Reduce the saturation. I don't like having saturation in my grain. And I'm not gonna do anything with the softness. I'm gonna leave it as is. And for the rest of these, I'm going to disable the flicker. And I'm also going to disable the gate weave. I don't need that. Film gate. That's gonna be pretty cool if you want, you know, like a filmic frame, like in the old times. And the last one is the global blend. Basically the intensity of the whole effect. This is how it was before. This is after. I'm going to put it somewhere around here. I also have the enhancer in here. I'm going to delete that because I've done pretty much everything in Film Look Creator. And I also have sharpness. I can play around with the sharpness if needed, but I don't think I need to add any sharpness to this shot. Let's see. I think I'm gonna leave it at 0.49 and that's it. So this is the before and after, before and after. Alright, so as you can see, the results speak for themselves. Let me show you how this grade looks on other Action 4 clips. So I can go here, select all of my clips on my timeline, deselect this clip, middle mouse click on it, and just add the grade to all other clips. Let's see how it looks on this one. A bit too bright, I can go here, slightly reduce the brightness in the highlights and also the midtones. Now it looks kind of good. Let's see this clip. It kind of looks messy. I definitely need to do some adjustments in here. Let me fix the white balance first. Go to the Film Creator, play around with the split tone maybe. Let's see. Adjust the pivot, reduce the amount to about here maybe. Increase the exposure, maybe increase the contrast and also add some fade. Let's see. The last clip, let's choose this one for example. Again, I think the exposure is slightly too high. I'm going to reduce the exposure in the highlights and also the midtones. Let me play around with the white balance here slightly. So I'm gonna go to my Film Creator. Let's create something really moody in here. I'm gonna again go to the split tone. And this time, let's see, let's go for this, like teal blue. Yeah, let's go to somewhere around here and pivot it towards here maybe. Reduce the amount. Okay, somewhere around here looks good. I'm also going to slightly increase the contrast in here and maybe increase the fade. Let's see. I think somewhere around here looks fantastic. Anyhow, I think this is it for today. Thank you for watching. Let me know if you have any questions or comments down below. And also let me know down below if you want me to make a video comparing the enhancer to Film Creator. Peace.